Mr. Doyle visits schools often and is a fan of honest questions, his favorite being, "Is that your real nose?" He said, "In almost every class I am asked how I became a writer, and after I make my usual joke about it being a benign neurosis, as my late friend George Higgins once told me, I usually talk about my dad. My dad was a newspaper man, a man of great grace and patience and dignity, and he taught me immensely valuable lessons. If you wish to be a writer, write," he would say. "There are people who talk about writing, and then there are people who sit down and type. Writing is fast typing. Also, you must read like you are starving for ink. Read widely. Read everything. Read the Bible once a year or so, ideally the King James, to be reminded that rhythm and cadence are your friends as a writer. Most religious writing is terrible, whereas some spiritual writing is stunning. The New Testament in the King James Version, for example. Note how people get their voices and hearts and stories down on the page. There is no writer better at getting his heart down on the page than Mr. Doyle." A while ago, a friend of mine sent me an essay from Brian Doyle, and part of it reads as follows. "Our hearts are not pure. Our hearts are filled with need and greed as much as with love and grace, and we wrestle with our hearts all the time. The wrestling is who we are. How we wrestle is who we are." In his email, this friend said that he's never been more envious of pure talent than when reading an essay by Brian Doyle, and I agree. His talent is worth envying. He is the editor of Portland Magazine, the winner of the 2008 award in literature from the American Academy of Arts and Letters, the author of a dozen books, collections of essays, short stories, prose poems, and a novel, Mink River. His essays have regularly appeared in Best American Essays, Best Spiritual Writing, and he won the American Scholars Best Essay Award in 2000, and his awards go on and on. He is a writer whose work is full of wit and wisdom. He has a passionate way of telling a story about life and about love. He is one of the most accomplished writers you will ever read, and if you're smart, you will read his writing. Please join me in welcoming Mr. Brian Doyle.
There? Okay, here we go. First of all, my mom and dad raised me right. My dad's 93, my mom's 92, and it's a May December romance, as my dad says. So before I do anything else, I thank you. You don't know me from a hole in the wall, and I don't know you. And chances are good that our roads aren't going to cross much in this lifetime. So before I do anything else, I say thank you for your witness, for your generosity, for your grace to me. The gift of your witness for an hour seems like an eye-popping gift. So thank you very much. I hope to earn it, and if not, complain to Steve Tuttle and Pat Madden. and refunds will be issued, I understand, right? And free beer. Oh, no, sorry, BYU. Also, I don't have themes. Some of you have had me inflicted upon you before. I seem to come to BYU every 2-3 years to ruin students' lives. But I don't have themes, but I want to insist on a couple of things today, okay? One, stories are food. Stories are holy. Stories are nutritious. Stories are crucial. If we don't have real good stories, if we don't have substantive stories, and I'm not talking fiction or nonfiction, I'm talking about how stories matter, you know? If you don't pay attention to how stories matter and collect and share stories that matter to you in your life, then you're going to suffer under nothing but lies and performance art from politics and religion. And you should be ashamed of yourself. Stories are food, man, they are. And if we don't have it and trade good stories and pick out the stories that are best, then we're going to be doing nothing but accepting marketing and advertising and a bunch of whopping lies. Okay, so some stories really matter. One of the stories I'll read to you today, I want you to read, when you leave today, you take a piece of paper with you that's called Dawn and Mary, about two ladies on December 14th last year who ran right at the bullets in Newtown in Sandy Hook Elementary School. They ran right at the bullets, okay? So you take that with you. So on December 14th this year, when you open the newspaper and it's filled with nothing but horror and massacre and fear, you take that story and you read it and you share it with anybody you want. Give it away, post it on the interweb, as my lovely bride says. FaceNet. I'm like, no, Mary, not FaceNet, no. You know? So So that's my gift to you, is that you take that story and share with everybody you want. Not because Brian Doyle wrote it. Brian Doyle's an idiot. I've known Brian Doyle for 50 years. But it's because that story matters. In the same way as after September 11th, I wrote a piece called Leap, about the couple that leaped off the South Tower holding hands. I wrote 3 stories for my 3 friends who were roasted to white ash that day in the towers. Osama bin Laden murdered 3 of my friends. And afterwards, I was hapless and speechless and enraged and filled with vengeful thoughts like everybody else. And then finally, it was my daughter, age 10, our daughter. She didn't come out of me, who said to me, well, if you're not going to catch and tell stories, what are you going to do then? I was like, what are you talking about? And she said, well, Dad, you're always lecturing us. If God gives you a tool and you don't use your tool, that's a sin, right? I said, yeah. And she goes, well, Dad, no offense. Do you ever notice when people say no offense means I'm about to offend you? She goes, Dad, no offense, but you only have one tool. You say yourself, you're only good at catching and sharing stories, And so if you're not going to catch and share stories to fight back against murder, then isn't that a sin? And I said, go to your room. But she was right. She was right. And so you got to tell some stories sometimes. And if we tell the right stories at the right time, the world shifts a little, it seems to me. So I say that to you with absolute, genuine honesty. I'm not giving you a lecture or a sermon or a homily. I'm just a shaggy old guy who's not wise. But I'm telling you, man, stories matter. You should know that here. Here you're learning, and in your religion and in your education and in your life, there's some stories that really matter to you and some don't. The ones that matter to you, share them, okay? It's a holy thing. There's no religions without storytelling. Trust me on that one, okay? I'm a Catholic boy. We've been telling stories for 2,000 years. Some of them are true. So my father was talking to my dad the other day, and I said, geez, Dad, we were the biggest, bloodiest corporation on earth, the Catholic Church. He goes, yeah, we punted. We made a lot of mistakes. We invented terrorism. We called it the Crusades. So he goes, but, there was the one good thing about the time when we owned the world, when we were the biggest, most powerful military and corporation in the whole world. We owned France, Italy, and Spain. We owned all the best vineyards in the world. Ah, the good old days, he says. So anyway, so story. Somebody asked me, I was at the Orem Library the other day, and I was telling them that I was visiting a grade school recently, and a kid said, you're going on and on about stories and miracles and my usual obsessions, and this kid, 4th grade girl, raises her hand and says, Mr. Boyle, Mr. Boyle, so much for fame, She says, you're going on about miracles. Have you ever seen any miracles? I said, yeah. You know how you say stuff when, like, it just pops out, like your tack filter falls off for a second, and you just pop out whatever's in your head? And I said, have I seen miracles? Heck yes, I've seen miracles. I saw people come out of my wife. There were people living inside my wife. Ugh. It was like she was in an apartment building and there were people living in there without paying any rent or anything. And then I look up and all the kids are looking at me like, ah. So anyway, well, here's the first story. The Coherent Mercy gave my lovely bride and I 3 children. We had a 2-year-old daughter, and then suddenly we had twins. So things were looking good for a couple of years there with one kid. Suddenly we were inundated. There were more kids than there were of us. We got outnumbered, and we never really recovered. But I coach like every other dad. I coach my son's sports teams, right? Because nobody else wants to do it. So the dads do it. So let me begin by reading you this. Rec League. 3 years ago, I volunteered to coach the 4th grade boys in our local basketball league. I did so for the usual reasons men coach, because none of the other dads would do it, even though I begged and pleaded, but they all backed away slowly, their mouths crammed with creative excuses. So I coached, so to speak, the first year, and then again the next year, because none of the other dads would do it, and then again last year, because heck, I'd always been the coach for as long as anyone could remember. And to stay sane, I kept notes about certain misadventures, like the time I started practice by making the boys run laps, and then got into an interesting discussion with a dad about grilling fish and forgot all about the boys until one boy threw up after 37 laps. Or about the many times my players were so excited they shot at the wrong basket. Or about the time my point guard, my son Joey, by the way, used such foul and reprehensible language to the referee that we had to call 2 timeouts in a row. We were laughing so hard. Or the time that a crow hopped into the gym and everybody freaked out. Or the time a player on another team put his cell phone in his jock, and when a pass hit him amidships, his phone rang. We had to call timeout that time too because we were laughing so hard. Or the kid we had one year who just could not get the idea of dribbling the ball down pat and ran with it everywhere, his arm out like a running back, fending off defenders. This was a boy named Andy who lived, I said to him at one point, all right, your homework, Andy, you've clearly never touched the ball. He asked me the first day of practice, which side of the ball is up? You know, I was like, he had never played the game before, and I said to him, all right, your homework is to go do 100 layups. Every night you do 100 layups. You got a basket at your house? And he says, which house? I said, okay, half the world's divorced, I guess. And, well, do you live with your mom or your dad? And he goes, I live with my grandma. I have 3 houses. I was like, my heart cracked, you know, and man. Or the game we played one time that was as close to perfect as I think I'll ever see in this holy earth. My boys sprinting and actually playing defense for a change and hitting the boards in such creative, exuberant fashion that I leaned back in my rickety folding chair in the echoing gym and wanted to cry for reasons that remain murky to me. There were other reasons to cry. Boys with moms who lived in one house and dads who lived in another. Boys who never saw much of their moms or dads. Boys without moms or dads at all. Boys who were so clearly happy and safe at practice and games because maybe they weren't very happy or safe in the world beyond the basketball court. And the game and its trappings were sweet refuges for them. We take family life and communal warmth for granted way more than we should. And one thing coaching gave me was greater respect for the tendrils of community, the neighborliness of a town, the way people quietly help each other out, the way it really does take a village to raise a kid right. You know, parenthetically, one thing that I'm real impressed with at the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, which I thought was ladder when I was a child, L-A-D-D-E-R. I was like, why do they need ladders in Mormonism? What's up with that? But I'm so impressed with the way you take care of each other. It seems to me in your world, if somebody's busted, 10 people reach for the broken person. That seems so cool. I hope you understand how cool it is. It's not like that everywhere else in the world, you know? So, I mean, you guys are addicted to football, but hey. Mostly coaching was hilarious and poignant. I saw some boys grow more than a foot taller in my time as coach. I spent hundreds of hours with them in all the grade school gyms there are in my town. I met a lot of excellent janitors. I made boys run and laugh, which are good things to do. And they made me listen to their horrendous thumping music, which wasn't as bad as I thought it was going to be. We talked about politics and books and girls and burgers and girls, all riveting subjects. They brought me back to the sinuous, quicksilvered, generous geometry of basketball, the most American of games, with its energy and violence and grace and joy and competitive drive, its swing and rhythm and zest. They gave me one last gift, those boys, near the end of my last season, when a kid got the ball, a gentle, sweet kid who never played the game before in his life. And he was so excited to have the ball in a clear lane to the basket that he ran delightedly to the wrong basket and scored. And everyone cheered and shook his hand, and he blushed, and the game flew on, ancient and relentless, but I sat there shivering with joy. It was one of those great moments. Another thing I would suggest to you is that there are no small moments. There are no little things. As my dad says, there are no boring moments, only people too boring to understand how miraculous moments are. You know, that boy was Andy, the boy who had said to me, which side of the ball is up? You know, he hadn't scored a basket in his whole life. And in the last game, he drove to the wrong basket without dribbling and hit a layup, which he'd practiced and practiced and practiced at his grandmother's house. And he was at the wrong basket, and he committed a traveling violation, and the ref, bless his soul, did not blow the whistle. And he scored the basket, and nobody laughed. And my team, my point guard, bless his soul, called timeout so they could congratulate him for the basket that he'd scored. And nobody said to him, Andy, you buffoon, you scored at the wrong basket. Nobody did. Everybody recognized the sacramentality of the moment. And I sat there, of course, sobbing like a baby, once again. You know? Here, in the Irish Catholic way, let's cut a moment of emotional power immediately with a joke. There were these 3 rabbis in a canoe. And this is a piece I love to read to high school kids because they get very uncomfortable. First kiss. So even the title, you could see the high school kids start bringing their hats down over their faces, you know, especially the guys for some reason. One thing nobody ever informs you of when you get ready to kiss a girl for the first time is where to put your nose. Do you lay it alongside hers like a skipper eases a ship along the dock? Or do you take turns, alternating left and right? You laugh, but this is a pressing question, as you well remember yourself. And your hands, do they quest? Or do they alight on her shoulders like birds, like leaves? The glasses on each of your noses, is it sweet when they clink, or is that dorky? Should you take them off just before you kiss, or is that too confident that you will be kissing? And most of all, the breathing. This is a real problem. Do you hold your breath? Do you aim for staggered breaths like in the pool? And who's in charge? If your partner wants to retire, what are the accepted signal flags for such a decision? Can you appeal? I hear you laughing, but you were in the same boat as me. We were shaking. We so wanted to do this well and so wanted not to be seen to want to. In a sense, it was practice for so very many things that we would want but would not know how to get or know what to do with after we got them. You know full well what I mean. Nothing was as gently sweet, nothing so roaringly nerve-wracking. How could both things be true at once? How could that be? Yet it was so, and it would be hourly more so the rest of your life. The first time I read this in high school recently, and a kid, again a girl, why is it a girl that always asks the smart questions? Guys are drawing bombs, and a girl raised her hand and says, I got a question. I said, yes, and she goes, who's the first girl you ever kissed? And I immediately said, Teresa O'Connell. She had braces and glasses, and I had glasses, so it was like spaceships docking in space. and then my glasses got hooked into her braces? That was unnerving. And thank God her father came down angry to break it up. So now you know too much about me. Let's see. I was talking to students this morning. I was visiting Pat Madden's class, and I was talking about how I feel like in recent years, especially, I feel like more of a listener than I am a writer even, you know? Like people tell me stories. If you ask questions and then leave people a window to speak into, they'll tell you amazing stories, just astonishing stories, you know? My dad says all the time, my dad's still smoking a cigar, 93, still puffing away. He goes, what difference does it make now, he says. You know, and he goes, learn to ask a question and then shut your pie hole. You know, and it's the secret to great literature, says Pop. So here's a story this woman told me the other day, and I like to read this at readings because I think, you know, we forget. We talk about wars, Afghanistan, Iraq, and should we invade Iran, and should we invade Syria, and you know, resolutions and international conflicts, and we forget what all this stuff boils down to. Tall, lanky kids, you know? It's all children. How come old men don't go to war, you know? If I was king of the world, I would turn it around. Only guys who make the decision to go to war can go to war. How come women don't start wars? Why is that? You know, if it was up to me, in my church, we got a new pope, right? We got a new pope, we got a Jesuit. We didn't get a Catholic pope, we got a Jesuit. But if I was the new pope, I would make an instant rule that suddenly women are in charge. Everybody has a new boss wearing high heels and a skirt. Deal with it. You know, wouldn't that be a better church? Seems to me. But you guys, you're all Catholic, right? Anyway, here's a story this woman told me. I bumped into a woman the other day, 28 years old. Okay, and she told me this story. And I tell you this story so that we can all think for a second. All the kids wearing uniforms for us, they're kids. They're children. You know, we forget. You know. I work for the University of Portland, which reminds me, we had the best women's soccer team in the West Coast until 2 years ago, when a certain university in Provo came into my league. And suddenly we're tied for first in the West Coast Conference with some team from Provo. I'm a little bitter about it. So, let's just get over that. Anyway, I talked to this young woman the other day, and you forget that these are kids, right? We gave our highest alumni award recently to a guy, a colonel in the Army, 36 years old, this kid, 36 years old, Colonel Paul Stahaley. And I said to him, hey man, 2 tours in Iraq, 1 tour in Afghanistan, you know, you can't question this guy's patriotism or courage or anything. And I said to him, hey man, you know, career Army, what's the point? What's the point of your career? What's the point? Career Army, why? And he said, oh, Mr. Doyle, my job is to put my job out of business. My job is to make war something that you visit in a museum. My job is to make a world where a 4-year-old kid will say, Grandpa, what does the word gun mean? You know, and I was thinking, yeah, that's the way, that's the way. You know, the people who are most against war, people who are in wars. You know, I quote my dad, who was in not 1 but 2 wars. My dad was at Bougainville, Guadalcanal, and then got called back into the Korean War. You know, stupid of him. He stayed in the Army Reserve after the Second World War. Dumb. But he says, war is stupid. War is the stupidest way to solve problems ever invented. Osama bin Laden's biggest problem is that he was stupid. He thought that killing people to convert them to your belief is a good use of resource. It's stupid. You know, we tried the Crusades, you know, but so war is dumb. But anyway, I met this child the other day, 28 years old. My lovely bride says, "You can't call her a kid." I'm thinking, she's a kid to me. She's 28. Boots. Recently, I met a quiet young woman who didn't say much, but what she said was wry and pithy and direct. And after a while, I asked if I could take notes as she talked, and she said, okay. And this is most of what she said. "My name is Jacqueline. You can call me Jackie. Until recently, you could call me Lieutenant. I'm now retired from the service. I'll be 27 years old on Sunday at 1400 hours. I was a hematology nurse. I'm in good health considering I drink tea. I learned to love tea in Iraq. Some days we had tea 10 times a day. We found a samovar and learned how to use it. There was a man among us who could play that thing like a guitar. It got so he couldn't drink anything other than the tea he summoned from the samovar. It was a most remarkable tea. He vanished one day when his truck was hit by the bandits. Another man took his place. He vanished too. I took his place. After a while, I forgot everybody's names. For a while, I called people by their numbers, but after a while, I didn't call them anything. That's when I knew I had war sickness, big time. I never got hit by fire, but pretty much everyone I know did. For a while there, I thought it was me, that as soon as I said hello to someone, or shook hands or learned their names, they were doomed. So I stopped touching people and learning their names. You would think wigging out in the middle of the war would be bad, but it's just normal. No one talks about what happens to the people nothing happens to, but something happens to them and no one talks about it. This to me in America, in the United States of America, in our country. No one talks about what happens to the people nothing happens to, but something happens to them and no one talks about it. Man, probably because we don't have any words for what happens. The fact is that wars kill words, but no one talks about that. Wars kill everything except more wars. Wars never end. They just hibernate and mutate and come back stronger somewhere else. Wars are the zombies of history. Some of what wars kill off, you see getting killed off, like kids and towns and schools and Saturdays, but some you don't, like birds. Birds don't nest in wars, you know, so pretty soon there's no birds. And where are you without birds? What kind of world is that with no birds in it? You notice things getting killed off little by little, and then after a while you stop noticing things altogether. You just get by. By the end, all I cared about was my shoes. You want really good boots in a war? Trust me on this one. I had the best boots you could ever imagine, and I kept those things clean, oiled, and ready for anything. When I got out of the war, I kept wearing my boots this time. I wore them with pajamas and with my bathrobe and with shorts in the summertime. It's only the last few weeks I go anywhere without my boots. Those are really good boots. When I'm in those boots, nothing can happen to me. Trust me on this one. I keep them on a special shelf at home just in case. You want to know something real and true and honest and deep about war? I'll tell you, boots. Good boots are the secret. Really good boots. You know, it's like, oh man, somebody tells you a story like that. Your job is to catch that story and put it down as fast as you can and share it, you know? I mean, we talk about wars. They're big, they're children wandering around. It's just like in kindergarten, you know, people wandering around punching each other. Why? There's got to be a better way, you know? Desmond Tutu was just at my university, and somebody said to him, what is the point of evolution? Small question there, you know? And he goes, I'll tell you. And the kid said, the question was, what's the point of evolution? Why were we given such gifts as a species? Why are we so intelligent? Why do we have creativity? Why do we appear to have imagination more than any other species? Why? What's the point? And Tutu got up and said, I'll tell you the point. I have seen the murderers of children kneel down and beg forgiveness from the families of the children they murdered. And I have seen the parents and brothers and sisters and sons and daughters of the murdered cup the faces of the murderers in their hands and say, I forgive you. Tutu said, I don't know how that can be. I don't know how that can be. How people have that courage and grace and incredible generosity of spirit to say, I forgive you for the unforgivable is a mystery to me, said Tutu, but I have seen it with my naked, holy eyeballs. That is why we are here, to push toward that. That is why we are here. Why do you live in your religion? Why do I live in mine? It's not to go to services, you know? It's not to wear cool clothes. You know, it's because there's something underneath the religion that's genius, that has to do with generosity of spirit, that has to do with forgiving the unforgivable, that has to do with the nonsensical, the illogical, the unreasonable, the ridiculous. You know, I'm a great student of the ridiculous as a Catholic guy. You know, in my world, when the priest hoists up the host, we believe that there's a miracle, and Jesus himself enters a piece of bread from New Jersey. You know, go on, you gotta be kidding me. And all my Protestant friends are like, well, clearly that's a metaphor, or you know, clearly that's symbolic ritual. And I'm thinking, who's to say? Who's to say Jesus doesn't actually love bread from New Jersey? You know, I mean, come on, he's a nice Jewish boy. He probably, you know, so. But you know, to believe in the unbelievable, isn't it sort of the point? If you didn't, you would never get married. You know, I mean, believe me, I every morning I wake up and I find my lovely bride in the bed, and I think to myself, winner! You know, unbelievable! She's still here. Touchdown! You know, she said to me recently, we've been married for. I love asking her, how long have you been married? Because she goes, just a cat. I said, Mary, assume it's somewhere between 25 and 30 years. So, you know, and I said to her, I feel like every single day, I can't believe that you still married me, that you still said yes. Well, she didn't say yes. I got down on my knees to propose like you learn at husband school, right? And husband school's in Florida. Didn't you all go to husband school? You can get your certificate of achievement, you know? I got down on my knees, and she's about yay high. She's a little tiny thing, about the size of a blue heron. Or my brother Tommy says, she's the size of a fire hydrant. And I got down on my knees, and she's standing, so we're eye to eye, you know. And I said, wood. And she said, are you drunk? I'm like, no, Mary, focus. And I said, will. And she goes, are you having a heart attack or something? Because we're up on a hill. And I was like, Mary, try to pay attention, okay? And I finally got it out. Will you marry me? You know, it was like the biggest question ever. I only expect to ask that question once in this form, you know. And she goes, her face is working. She goes, and I'm thinking, say something. Even say no at this point. Let's just get out of this moment because I really want to go have a drink. And she goes, yeah. Oh, I can't believe I said yeah. Oh my God. My mother always said if I said yeah instead of yes, there would come a time when I really regretted using slang, and I can't believe that time has come. And you know, and my mother always said that, and I have some issues with my mother, and I'm still like down on my knees going, hello, you know, unbelievable. So, well, this is verging right off as usual. Every time I do a reading at BYU, I always think, okay, that was the weirdest hour in the whole long history of BYU. But this one seems like it's even weirder. So, here, let me read a little piece first. Let's see. I always feel, I want to leave time so we can have fun with questions and stuff. So, here's a little thing. The Coherent Mercy gave us 3 children, right? And 2 of them were small twin boys. I think I once read, for a long time in our bathroom when the boys were little, we had a thing pinned up in the bathroom wall. Rules for small twin boys in the bathroom. Rule number 1, point it down! You know. Rule number 5, each boy points his own pointer. Yeah. You know. Rule number 12, no, dad does have a pointer. Rule number 13, no, mom does not have a pointer. Rule number 14, no, I don't know where mom's pointer went. You know, et cetera, et cetera. Anyway, when they were little, I wrote this, their first shower. They were just about 2 years old, the twins, and the boss of the family was off somewhere, I think at the beach with her sisters. And the twins were roaring dirty, and it was time to move up to the big leagues. So I herded them into the shower and cut off all routes of escape and edged them into the cascade after checking that the temperature was perfectly perfect. And the boys were trepidatious and expressed themselves clearly and somewhat rudely about their misgivings. And then something happened that I want you to see. One of those things that's holy and funny and vaster than any universe I know. Their faces lit with delight as they got the hang of the thing. They laughed and thrust their faces up into the applause of the water. And I might have wept, but there was a lot of water around, and we weren't sure which was them throwing water on each other and Dad, and which was water leaping from above, and which was Dad crying yet again, because a moment like this had happened to him. There are so many moments like this. It could be that all moments are like this. It could be that we're all in the shower all the time. Amen. My sons, whenever I go, often whenever I pack to go do a visit or something like that, my sons will say, hey, you're wearing your cool black sweater. Are you doing a reading? I'm like, yeah. And they go, you're not going to read that thing about us being naked in the shower again, are you? You know, my sons are now 19, you know, big, tall teenagers, you know, and they just recovered from the whole surly, snotty thing. You guys were never rude to your parents, were you? You know, nobody here was surly to his or her father at age 16. Yes? Yeah, good. I respect the Mormons even more than I did this morning. You know, one of my sons said to me when he was 16 and in the total surly period, the only reason you wanted to be a dad is so you could be mean to me. And usually you let that go. Like I've had my kids tell me you're the worst dad ever, I hate you, you know, blah, 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 blah. But that was a new one on me. So I said to him, I'm sorry, let me get this straight. There's 3.5 billion men on earth. Your mother married me, of all those guys, and miraculously, against all sense, reason, and logic, she decided that I should be her partner for life. And the coherent mercy magically gave us 3 children, among them you, so that I would enjoy myself being mean to you. That's what you just said to me, right? That's what you just said. Is that what you actually think? There's a long pause, and he goes, yeah! I said, son, you are going to go to a Jesuit university. You know? No Catholic university for you. So, let's see. Let me read this before I forget. I'm telling you, you walk out of here with Dawn and Mary in your pocket and read it as you like, and then you copy it 100 times and you give it to everybody you know, because I want people to read that before December 14th, okay? Some stories matter, and if that day is only fear and horror, it's just like September 11th for me. If that's only an anniversary, then I don't think we did real well. You know, it's disrespectful to not say there was courage that day, bigger than any act of murder possible. This is bin Laden's problem. He told an old story. I got a new story. I got a story bigger than his little piddly story. His story is the old one where we'll kill people, and that will mean something. I got a story where you don't kill people, where courage and grace and mercy and forgiveness win and make murder look like the stupid little thing it is, right? So here's Dawn and Mary. Early one morning, several teachers and staffers at a grade school are in a meeting. The meeting goes for about 5 minutes when the teachers and the staffers hear a chilling sound in the hallway. We heard pop, 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 as one of the staffers said later. It's 9 o'clock in the morning in Newtown, Connecticut. There's a staff meeting, first thing, right? Principal meeting with all the staff. Most of the teachers and staffers dove under the table. That's the reasonable thing to do, and that's what they were trained to do, and that's what they did. But 2 of the staffers jumped or leapt or lunged out of their chairs and ran toward the bullets. Jumped or leapt or lunged. Which word you use depends on which news account of that morning you read. But the words all point in the same direction, right at the bullets. One of the staffers was the principal. Her name was Dawn. She had 2 daughters. Her husband had proposed to her 5 times before she finally said yes. And they'd been married for 10 years. They had a cabin on a lake. She liked to get down on her knees to work with the littlest kids in the school. The other staffer was named Mary. She had 2 daughters. She was a crazy football fan. She'd been married for 30 years. They had a cabin on a lake. She loved to go to the theater. She was going to retire in 1 year. She liked to get down on her knees, too, to work in the garden. The principal told the teachers and the staffers to lock the door behind her and the other staffer, and the teachers and the staffers did that. And then Dawn and Mary ran out into the hall. You and I have been in that hallway, haven't we? You and I spent years in that hallway. It's friendly and echoing when someone opens the doors at the end of the hallway. A wind comes and flutters through all the kids' paintings and posters on the tile walls. And Dawn and Mary jumped or leapt or lunged toward the bullets. Every fiber in their bodies descended from millions of years of bodies leaping away from danger, must have wanted to dive under the table. That's what you're supposed to do. That's what you're trained to do. That's how you get to live another day. That's how you get to stay alive, to paint with the little kids that work in the garden and hug your daughters and drive off laughing to the cabin on the lake. But they leapt for the door, and the principal said, "Lock the door after us." And they lunged right at the boy with the rifle. The next time someone says the word hero to you, you say this: there were once 2 women. One was named Dawn and the other was named Mary. They both had 2 daughters, and they both loved to kneel down to care for small holy beings. And they jumped out of their chairs, and they ran right at the boy with the rifle. And if we ever forget their names, if we ever forget the wind in that hallway that morning, if we ever forget what they did that morning, if we ever forget how there's something in every one of us beyond sense and reason that snarls at death and runs roaring right at it to defend children, if we ever forget that all children are our children, then we are fools who allowed memory to be murdered too. And what good are we then? What good are we then? You know, we are capable, every one of us has such wild, crazy, brave, cool, merciful, snarling courage. You know, why does it have to open only under great fires? Why? I don't know. You know, but the fireman who ran up into the towers on September 11th, you know, the lady who ran out with the child on her shoulders, the football player who caught a baby that a lady threw to him to save the baby, you know, the people who escaped from the towers and ran back into the towers to help people. You know, we're capable of that. It's not sense and logic and reason. It's not, you know. And if you let your religion and your citizenship be only sensible and logical and reasonable in politics and parties and official, it's wrong. It's not enough, you know? There's something great and glorious about LDS, and you know it, and it's not the religion, it's underneath it. There's a wild courage in being an American. You know, we can change the world. We can change the world by shaking our fist at old stupid murder, you know? The courage inside every one of us, you know? Mary Oliver says it best. What will you do with your one wild and precious life? You know? And it's not your career, and it's not even who loves you and who you're going to love. It's what are you going to bring? You know, you got a gift, you know, and how are you going to bring it to bear like a weapon against greed and corruption and violence? You know, the greatest line ever spoken in my state, ever written in my state, was not written by me, God help us, or Barry Lopez, or Ken Kesey, or Ursula Le Guin. It was William Stafford, the great poet, who said, violence is a failure of the imagination. You know? So you remember Dawn and Mary on December 14th. They ran right at the kid with the rifle, the poor stupid kid. The geek, of course, it was the geek kid who nobody talked to, who was a terrible athlete, who had zits. You know, the poor geeky kid that nobody talked to. If somebody had talked to that kid at the right time, you know, if somebody had reached out and touched that kid at the right moment, if somebody had said to that poor stupid kid, hey man, what's up? You know, you don't know what you can do just by saying, hey, how you doing? You know, the gift of you is the greatest thing that you can possibly give anybody. You know, you, man, you are a wild weapon of grace. You know, be honest about it. Don't take it for granted, you know? So, Dawn and Mary. Here I am crying in public again. Dang it. I talked to my mom the other day. Are you still crying in public? I said, yes, Mom. Good boy, she said. You know? I was telling the crowd, I did a reading last night at the Orem Library, and I was telling people, my mom, when she was, we slept 2 by 2, 7 boys, 1 girl, Irish Catholic family, you know, real poor. We slept 2 by 2. With the boys. My sister got her own room. I'm still bitter about it. But my mom would tiptoe in and wake up one boy and not the other. She had some weird gift where, you know, where she was able to do it. I'm not going to, no offense, but can I just touch you for 1 second? It's not harassment. She would tiptoe in and just go, very gently touch you on the shoulder and wake you up somehow, like with an electric zzz. And she would say, you are the smartest and handsomest of all the brothers. You'll never be the tallest, Brian, but you are the smartest and handsomest of all the brothers. Well, a couple of years ago at our family reunion, we discovered she did this for all the brothers. It was a huge disappointment to me. So, anyway. Well, can I read you a couple more pieces and then we do questions and stuff, yeah? Let me read you one more. I feel like I'm burning all the time giving you lectures and sermons, so, you know. All right, I tell you what, one more. Here's a little one. Holding hands. One time I spent a whole day looking for people holding hands. It turned out to be one of the most amazing days there ever was. Right off the bat, I saw lots of teens and 20s holding hands, couples of every sort and stripe, but I expected to see that, as holding hands at that age is really a way of public speaking. You know what I mean. So what began to knock me out all day long was everybody else, the 3 tiny school children holding hands as they all waited for the bus. A young man leading an old man who was maybe his dad. Two women who were maybe 80 years old holding hands as they gingerly inched down the museum stairs. A guy holding out his hand to another guy as the second guy got out of a cab perched over a gully filled with rainwater. A dancer and a poster holding her hands out to two other dancers. A dad walking along the street with a tiny girl holding his pinky and the dad half bent down as he walked listening to her talking. Two girls walking along holding hands until they split by a lamppost and then reached for each other again, which was pretty cool to see. A man and a woman coming out of a movie theater and reaching for each other without looking. That was either really cool or they took each other for granted. I don't know. But the sight that nailed me good and finished me off that day and stays with me still weeks later was a boy maybe 12 years old with a boy maybe 9. I figured they were brothers coming home from school with backpacks bouncing as they ran past. The older boy in the lead, but his hand trailing out behind him like a lifeline for the gasping kid brother. That was so cool it made me laugh. Partly because you could see that the older brother was hip to the fact that they were going to be seriously late unless they ran like crazy. But no way was he about to leave his dopey kid brother behind no matter what. But it was the younger kid's face that I can see right now, a wild, sweet face with just about everything in it. Laughter at how fast they ran and worry that they were going to be late and mom would be mad. An arrowed intent to keep up with his brother. And maybe you'll think I'm dreaming or thinking wishful or whatever, but I swear that little boy had a glint of mad love for his brother in his face. A kind of shining thing. Some kind of absolute joy, just that they were holding hands. Well, they rocketed by so fast they were gone before I could get turned around to see if they made the bus. But that glint in that young boy's face, that stays with me and will stay with me the rest of my life. That kid was so thrilled to have a hand in his hand. And really, when you think about it, what could ever be cooler than that? Amen. You know, I guess in a funny way, this hour to me seems like a time for us to hold hands. You know what I mean? Like, I really don't want this to be, I'm up here standing wearing my cool black sweater and you're not. You know, this is not audience and speaker. This is a story-catching team meeting. You know, stories matter, man. You know, mine are no better than yours. Yours are probably better because you're younger and taller. You know, so I wanted this to be a team meeting of story catchers, shenikis, as we say in the Irish, right? Witness, witness, witness. We all are witnesses to amazing stories. We catch them and share them, and in that way we advance the universe, right? And if we do this job right, someday a kid will have to go visit war in a museum. And that'll be a good day. That'll be a great day, right? So you with me here, brothers and sisters? You know? I did a reading the other day, and a lady came up to me, and she goes, "So you Catholic?" I said, "Yes, ma'am. We just spent an hour talking about Catholic stuff, and thought they made it patently clear." And she goes, "Well, because you have a future in the evangelical church." I said, "No, ma'am. My mother would smack me in the back of the head. You know, it was hard enough for my sister to go be a Buddhist. Okay, that was tough." So we have a good Irish Catholic family. My sister's a Buddhist nun in a monastery. My mother says, "We have a nun in the family, and we don't care what brand." So, well, this is probably a good place to stop because I could do this for hours, as you can see. I said to my lovely bride recently, "I feel like I'm sort of an introvert." And she said, "What? Are you an idiot?" "Yes, you are an idiot." You know. So, anyway, all right. Can I end this formal portion by in the same way we began? You know, well, now you know me too well, but you just gave me your time, and I cannot imagine anything sweeter or more generous than your witness to my attempt to tell stories that matter. Thank you from the bottom of my heart. Amen. My sister, the Buddhist nun, she likes to, in the Catholic world, you do this, right? You guys do that? No? And I notice when you pray, everybody covers their chests. I'm like, wow. It's like, what is it? Is it a bra thing? What do you... But my sister, to tease my parents, does this. Namaste is how you do it in the Buddhist world. I see you, I witness you, namaste, right? And my sister goes, just to annoy my mother, I think. So, we got time for a few questions and comic questions. Can I help you? Can I be of any assistance? You know. Yes, sir.
Question. What is it about the language used in adolescent literature that you feel impacts these issues that you've talked about, a lot of serious issues?
In adolescent literature? What do you mean?
Yeah, the language that used more simplistic language as opposed to more adult fiction. Does that make sense?
Yeah, the question is about basically about young adult fiction, yeah, right? I think it's probably a mistake, to be honest. I read a lot of young adult fiction. I had a lot of young adults in the house for a long time, and so I read all the stuff that they were reading, and I thought sometimes the writer was trying too hard to be simple. And I found it a little disrespectful. It seems to me that children are really smart, you know, and why not challenge them and say, hey, you don't know this word? Go look it up, man. You know, it used to be you would say, go to the dictionary. Now you could just go steal your sister's computer, you know. And I don't know. I guess stories, but I love, you know, kids reading seems to me to be a really powerful religious, political, and civic act. You know, if you don't read, you're going to get stories laid on you that are a lot of lies. You know, if you don't read and you don't trade stories, you're going to be accepting a lot of marketing, in my opinion. So, other questions? Yes, ma'am.
Is that your real nose?
Is that my real nose? That question was actually asked of me by a child, a 4-year girl in 4th grade. She raised her hand. Mr. Doyle said yes, and she goes, yes, I have a question. Is that your real nose? I was like, what? And you know how kids are so artless in the way they speak? And she goes, I said, well, yeah, most of it. It's been busted 3 times, you know, so it kind of wanders off westward over there at the bottom. And I said, yeah, it's mine, but it's been busted a few times. So, like, why are you asking? She goes, well, you have a speech defect. And in the back of the room, we've been saying, why do you have such a speech defect? And why do you use that funny accent? Are you from New York? I said, yes, ma'am. Yeah, I am. You know, are you talking to me? You know, so anyway. Yes, sir. Mr. Franklin, Dr. Franklin.
Tell us about the research you did for the piece you wrote about the 2 women. Was that all from newspaper accounts?
Yeah, I got fast. The same thing happened to me after September 11th. I think as an act of citizenship and reverence, moments like that, I find myself just eating every possible thing I can read about it. I don't want to listen to comment on it. You know, news stations on TV are people telling you what they think you should think a lot of the time. But so I wanted to read every scrap of detail, who was where and what happened, and like the one teacher who hid her children in a closet, you know, and locked the closet and stood in front of it, saying, go ahead, shoot me, man, but you're not taking these kids, you know, and stuff like that. Because I want to find the story. Underneath there's got to be something. There will be something that will blow your mind. You know, the same thing happened to me after September 11th. I read every scrap of information about it I could possibly find. And in a way, it was a desperate act, I suppose, you know. But each time that happens, it's funny to me. It's not funny, it's sweet and mysterious and probably holy that a story will come and present itself to me. Tell me, I want to be told. And that's what happened with Dawn and Mary. I realized, wait a minute, against every iota of their being, they ran right at death. They knew they were going to die. They knew it, and they did it anyway. They didn't have a prayer of stopping this kid, and they did it anyway. You know, I think that just is incomprehensible to me and the coolest thing I can imagine. And believe me, I've asked that question of myself. Would I have that courage? And I don't know. I don't know the answer. But I know great grace when I see it. And I will not tell that story. Somebody's got to tell it, man. It has nothing to do with Brian Doyle and everything to do with stories need to be told sometimes. You know full well what I mean in your own lives. You know, this is the great sadness of death. As I was telling people the other day, my friend Bernie Harrington just died. Great guy, wonderful man. And on his deathbed, I said to him, you go receive a blessing in the Irish world. You get a blessing from the Taoiseach. And I said, are you scared? And he goes, no, it's a great big recycling program. I don't have a problem with that. I had a great life. And he goes, but when I die, so many stories will be sucked away and be untold. Some of them true, as he said. So, and I never forgot that. I always thought that was a great moral compass, you know. Catch and tell the stories while you have the chance. Life is short, you know, so. There's a question in the back. You, sir.
Yeah. So, do you see people out then?
I mostly just kind of wander around and ask people questions, you know. If there was beer enough and time, you would tell me 20 unbelievable stories in the next 2 hours. You know, if I just gave you a chance. Everybody's stuffed with great stories. You know, stories of pain and joy and hilarity and goofiness and grace under duress, and so mostly I just sort of wander around asking people questions, and it's a great trick of journalism to ask a question and then be silent. Because as my dad said, people want to fill silence. People are uncomfortable with it. So yeah, sometimes when I really want to dig something from a person, I seek them out and go ask. I've written a couple of books like that. I wrote a book about a year in a vineyard and a book about hearts, about how hearts work and don't work, the actual biology of, I don't know anything about either of those things. But I went to people and said, how does that work? What happens? The aorta is where? And then the heart can be turned around like that? And you can actually be born with a half a heart, not a whole heart, and not die? And like, how does that work? And what do you do then? And how do you fix that? You just ask questions. So asking questions is a great genre of literature, I think. There's a great book by William Stafford called Every War Has Two Losers. That's mostly just questions that he asks. Is a big dog more important than a little dog? Is a louder person more true? If somebody speaks loudly, is that more true than somebody who speaks softly? I mean, these are interesting questions about power and, violence and stuff. So, yes, sir.
You mentioned at the beginning that to have a gift from God and not use it is a sin. I agree. And no one who's been here would deny that you've got a gift. My question is...
Oh, my God. Call my mom now, for God's sake. Yeah. I am the smartest and handsomest of all the brothers.
So my question is just when in your life and how did you discover that gift? I would be curious as sort of, how do you come upon that knowledge that you have this?
I got nothing else. My great dream was to be a professional basketball player, but as my father said to me once, I'm not aware that 5'10" guys with glasses and ponytails are dominating basketball. Which, he actually said to me, hey, what are you, 5'10", 160? I'm sorry, those guys are not going to win. And then Allen Iverson turned out to be the greatest player in the game. I was like, I missed my chance. Unbelievable. So in my case, I grew up Irish American and Catholic in a large family. And my dad was a newspaper man, my mom was a teacher. So I think all those things were really to grow up American is to be story-addled. It's not an accident that Twain is our finest writer. Twain was a tall tale teller of genius, So to grow up American is to be already interested in stories and saga and lies, and we're genius liars. We're the best. We're the best ever, I think. And then to also grow up of Irish descent is the same way. These are oral cultures, American and Irish, I think. And to grow up Catholic is to be awake to the miracle of the moment. All moments. The great Andre Dubus said, all moments are pregnant with miracle. And as Blake says, if the doors of perception were cleansed, you would see everything as it is, infinite. So I think to be awake to a world where there was patent magic everywhere. And then finally, my mom and dad were story catchers by profession. So part of it for me was background. And my family was very Irish, so my grandparents were gifted storytellers, and loved to tell stories, and they would go on and on and on. So if you didn't have a story in my family, my mom didn't know your name. We're not sure she knows my brother Peter and Tommy's names. She calls my brother Tommy 8 every once in a while just to annoy him. So, and also we read like maniacs. There were books everywhere and magazines everywhere. So we early get into voice on the page, and so somebody asked me recently in grade school, why did you become a writer? And you know how sometimes, again, it just pops out, the answer pops out. I said, to get the girls. And even yesterday at Orem High School, God help me, some kid said to me, why did you become a writer? I said, beer and money. And I was like, oh no. These things just pop out. I should be quiet. So. Other questions? We got a couple more minutes. Anything? Yes, ma'am.
What do you think about television and media?
What do I think about television and media?
Influence on children.
I think kids are a little too screen-addled. Like the world is beyond your screen. I'm a big fan of all the cool new toys being invented all the time. Really, those are story delivery vehicles at their best. But I see a lot of people who spend a lot of time fixated on their thing. You go to the airport, it's fascinating to watch. The airport in the old days used to be, they're happy places. People hugging each other and weeping with joy and weeping as somebody leaves. And now everybody's on their thing, And I keep telling young writers, look, this will help you. This is for losers. This will help you. This is how you break up with her and she breaks up with you. This is how you write. You become a writer. Nobody has ever written a novel this way yet. Hello. So I'm a big fan of cool new delivery devices. My great dream is that someday you'll be able to open a book or a magazine and up will come a hologram, just like in Star Wars, And I want to do that with our magazine. Bing! Up comes the editor. Hey, I'm talking to you. You know? So, but with my kids, you know, we tried to kind of restrict screen time, but then they became teenagers, so that was that. You know, so one more question maybe, and off we go. Yes, ma'am.
If you were going to spend 2 hours with your friend in the back, do you have questions you tend to ask people when you first meet them, when you're looking for their story?
Well, I've learned to ask, one great thing about being a guy is that you can use sports as a language, right? How about those Red Sox, you know? And then that primes the pump, you know? Or another thing I do all the time is, especially with guys, you can say, hey, don't you hate the Los Angeles Lakers? What a bunch of selfish, arrogant whiners. You know, hey, Kobe Bryant, most selfish, great player ever, huh? He wouldn't know a pass if it bit him in the butt, you know? And that sets the pump going. What I want to ask everybody, if I had time, I would say, tell me the shape of your wild heart. You know, tell me of love and pain in your life. You know, tell me of how did your parents stumble into each other and allow you to enter this universe in this form. There's never been a you before in 10 billion years, and there'll never be another one. That's like, you gotta be kidding, that is so cool. You know? So I wanna ask big questions like that. Tell me about your grace under duress. And you ask somebody a question like that, they call the cops. You know, so you just say, hey, what's up? You know, what's up? Really, what's your work? In America, the default question is, what do you do for a living? Which I think is sort of a dumb question, you know? It's like, so often family is another way to talk to people. Oh, you have kids? Oh, really? You know, how many? 20? What are you, Mormon? You know, I was just telling my friends and I, we were just talking about rule number one of being a guy. You never, ever, ever say to a woman, oh, are you pregnant? Because every guy asks that question once and the answer is no. You know, so the guy rule is if you see a head or a hand coming out of a woman, then you can say, are you pregnant? You know, so asking about family is often a good place, or where are you from? Hey, where are you from? Oh, really? You know, and then off you go. All you got to do is get started, and then things generally sail off, you know. See, for you, wine helps. You know, a friend of mine who's a winemaker says there's 20 stories in every bottle of wine, and they get less true as you go down the. So, anyway, we better go. It's 1 o'clock. So thank you for having me. Appreciate it.